They laughed at her clothes, they ignored her presence, they spoke over her like she did not exist. She was just the poor American girl who married into the wrong family, or so they thought. What no one knew was that the woman they treated like nobody carried a past so powerful that when her brother's elite in-laws finally learned the truth, the room fell silent, reputation shattered, and regret arrived too late. Emily Carter had learned the art of silence long before she ever entered the grand marble halls of the Whitmore family mansion. Silence was how she survived. Silence was how she observed. And silence was how she endured being treated like she was invisible. She was born in a quiet coastal town in Oregon where mornings smelled like salt and pine trees and people knew each other by first names. Her childhood was not poor, but it was modest, honest, and grounded. Her father, Thomas Carter, was a man of principles, not connections. He owned a small logistics company that started with one truck and grew slowly through discipline and integrity. Her mother, Helen, was a schoolteacher who believed kindness was the strongest form of intelligence. Emily grew up learning that worth did not come from wealth but from character. She excelled in school, stayed away from attention, and preferred books over parties. Her older brother, Daniel, was different. He was ambitious, sharp, and fearless. While Emily observed the world quietly, Daniel challenged it head-on. When Daniel left for New York after college, he carried the weight of family expectations on his shoulders. Emily stayed back, helping her parents and working as a freelance graphic designer. Life was peaceful until the day Daniel called with news that changed everything. He was getting married. Daniel had fallen in love with Victoria Whitmore, the daughter of one of the most influential investment families in Manhattan. The Whitmores were old, money, elite, and powerful. Their name opened doors that money alone could not. The engagement was celebrated in high society circles, but behind closed doors it came with conditions. The Whitmores approved of Daniel only because of his intelligence and potential. They did not care about where he came from, but they were very clear about one thing. His family was not to be involved. Emily sensed it immediately when she attended the engagement dinner. The glances, the polite smiles that never reached the eyes, the way conversations paused when she entered the room. She wore a simple navy dress, while everyone else sparkled in designer gowns. No one said anything directly, but the message was clear. You do not belong here. Daniel noticed it too. But he was trapped between love and loyalty. Victoria assured him it was just social awkwardness, but her parents insisted on maintaining distance from Daniel's family, especially Emily. They labeled her as irrelevant. When Daniel and Victoria married, the wedding was held at a private estate in Connecticut. Emily was seated far from the family table. No introductions were made. No photos were taken with her. During the reception, someone asked if she was part of the staff. She smiled and said nothing. After the wedding, Daniel moved into the Whitmore world completely. Corporate dinners, charity galas, luxury vacations. Emily was rarely invited, and when she was treated like an obligation, not family. The worst came during a Christmas gathering at the Whitmore mansion. Emily arrived with a handmade gift for Victoria, a leather-bound planner she designed herself. Victoria thanked her distractedly and placed it aside without looking. At dinner, Emily tried to join a conversation about art investments, but was ignored. One of Victoria's cousins laughed quietly and whispered something about small-town girls pretending to be sophisticated. Emily heard it. She did not react. What none of them knew was that Emily Carter was not just a quiet graphic designer. Over the years, she had built something quietly, powerfully, and independently. Her freelance work had turned into a branding agency servicing high-level clients under a company name that did not reveal her identity. Investors respected her mind even if they had never seen her face. She kept her success private even from Daniel. Not out of secrecy, but humility. The Whitmores continued to underestimate her. They excluded her from conversations about business, assuming she would not understand. They spoke openly about money around her like she was not worth impressing. And then came the night everything began to change. Daniel invited Emily to a high-profile charity gala hosted by the Whitmores' biggest partners. It was a strategic move. He needed her there not as family but as support. Emily agreed without hesitation. She arrived in a simple black dress, elegant but understated. The same dismissive looks followed. But across the room, powerful eyes noticed her differently. A tech mogul paused mid-conversation when he recognized her voice. A venture capitalist stiffened when she corrected a market assumption with calm precision. Slowly, whispers began not about her clothes, but about her mind. The Whitmores noticed the shift too late. By the end of the night, someone asked the question that would shatter the illusion they had built around her. Who exactly is Emily Carter? And for the first time since marrying into power, Daniel watched his elite in-laws realize they might have made the biggest mistake of their lives. The change did not happen loudly. It happened in glances, pauses, and the sudden way conversations began to circle back toward Emily as if pulled by gravity. Daniel felt it before anyone else. Standing beside his wife, he noticed how people who had never once acknowledged his sister were now finding excuses to stand closer to her. A man from Silicon Valley learned to ask thoughtful questions. A woman from a European venture fund listened with open admiration. Emily answered calmly, never boasting, never explaining more than necessary. Victoria noticed too, and it unsettled her. She had always believed control came from status and appearances. Emily threatened that belief without even trying. Later that evening, one of the Whitmore board members approached Victoria with a confused smile. He asked how long Emily had been consulting for Atlas Horizon Group. Victoria blinked. She did not recognize the name. She laughed lightly and said Emily was a designer who worked from home. The man frowned politely. Atlas Horizon was not a small firm. It was a rising powerhouse responsible for rebranding 3 Fortune 500 tech companies. Its founder was known for being elusive, brilliant, and fiercely selective. No one had ever met her in person. Victoria felt a knot tighten in her chest. Daniel overheard the exchange, and his heart skipped. He turned toward Emily, who was now laughing softly with a senior investment banker who treated her like an equal. For the first time, Daniel realized how little he truly knew about his own sister. As the night continued, Emily excused herself to get some air. She stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city lights, breathing deeply. She had not planned to reveal anything tonight. She had only come to support her brother. But the truth had a way of surfacing when it was ready. She was not surprised when Mr. Whitmore himself joined her. Charles Whitmore was a man used to command. He had built an empire through calculated moves and cold judgment. He looked at Emily now not with disdain but curiosity. He asked her directly what her role was at Atlas Horizon. Emily looked at him calmly and told him she founded it. The silence between them was heavy. Charles studied her face, searching for arrogance and finding none. He asked why no one knew. She replied that she preferred her work to speak louder than her name. That answer unsettled him more than any display of wealth could have. Inside the ballroom, Victoria watched from afar as her father listened intently to Emily. She felt something she had never felt before toward her sister-in-law. Fear. Later that week, Charles Whitmore requested a private meeting with Emily. He framed it as a conversation, not a negotiation. Emily agreed on one condition. Daniel had to be present. They met in a glass conference room overlooking Manhattan. No assistants, no interruptions. Charles spoke first, acknowledging that his family had misjudged her. He said it without apology, but with something close to respect. Emily listened, then calmly spoke of her journey. She explained how she built her company quietly, how she avoided publicity, and how she valued independence over validation. She spoke about her parents' values and her refusal to weaponize success. Daniel sat stunned. Pride and regret tangled in his chest. He realized how many times he had tried to protect Emily by hiding her when she had never needed protection at all. Charles asked what she wanted. Emily answered honestly. Nothing. She said she did not need their approval or access. She only wanted her brother treated with dignity and her parents respected. The request was simple yet devastating. It exposed how little humanity the Whitmores had shown. From that day, things changed, but not smoothly. Victoria struggled. She felt exposed. Her friends whispered. Questions spread. How could the woman they dismissed hold more real influence than any of them? Emily did not flaunt it. She continued to dress. Simply, speak kindly and decline attention. That restraint made it worse for those who had wronged her. At the next family gathering, Emily was seated at the head of the table beside Charles. Conversations revolved around her. Insights. Advice was sought. Apologies were offered awkwardly. But one apology was missing. Victoria avoided her eyes. The tension built silently until one moment shattered the fragile peace. During a dinner with elite investors, Victoria made a careless remark about people pretending to be humble to hide ambition. The room went quiet. Emily smiled gently and replied that humility was not a mask but a choice. That sentence traveled faster than any rumor. And it reached the ears of someone whose involvement would force the Whitmores to confront a truth they could no longer control. Because the next revelation would not come from Emily. It would come from her past. The call came early in the morning before the city had fully woken up. Charles Whitmore rarely took personal calls at that hour, but when he saw the name on the screen, he answered immediately. The voice on the other end belonged to Richard Hale, one of the most respected figures in American infrastructure finance, a man whose approval could make or break billion-dollar projects. Richard did not waste time with pleasantries. He asked a simple question. Was Emily Carter part of the Carter Logistics family from Oregon? Charles paused. He said yes. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Richard exhaled slowly and said that changed everything. Years earlier, when Whitmore Global was on the verge of collapse during a shipping crisis, it was a small logistics company that rerouted critical supplies overnight, preventing catastrophic losses. That company belonged to Thomas Carter, Emily's father. He never demanded credit, never asked for partnership, and refused publicity. He simply did what was right. Richard remembered that night clearly because it saved thousands of jobs, including his own. Charles Whitmore had never known. The realization hit him like a blow. The family he had dismissed, the woman he had underestimated, had quietly shaped parts of the empire he was so proud of. The past he ignored was now knocking on his door with undeniable force. That afternoon, Charles ordered a full internal review of historical partnerships. The findings confirmed it again and again. The Carter name appeared where problems were solved and not advertised. Integrity without ego. Strength without noise. Meanwhile, Emily sat in a small cafe near Central Park sketching ideas for a non-profit campaign she was designing pro bono. She had no idea the storm forming behind closed doors. Victoria was unraveling. She had grown up believing power was inherited, curated, and displayed. Emily destroyed that illusion by existing. Every whisper, every sideways glance now carried judgment. People were no longer asking who Emily was. They were asking who Victoria was without the Whitmore shield. At a private luncheon, one of Victoria's closest friends asked her why she never mentioned Emily's background. Victoria snapped defensively, saying it was irrelevant. The friend replied quietly that character was never irrelevant. That sentence stayed with her. Daniel watched all of this unfold with a mix of guilt and clarity. He remembered the moments he had stayed silent when Emily was ignored. He told himself he was protecting her. Now he understood he was protecting himself. He finally confronted Victoria late one night. He asked her why his sister had always been treated like an embarrassment. Victoria tried to deflect, blaming tradition, optics, and expectations. Daniel listened, then calmly told her that respect was not optional. That was the first crack in their perfect image. The turning point came during the annual Whitmore Foundation Gala, broadcast across major media platforms. This was their crown jewel event. Influence on displaying, legacy on stage. Emily had not planned to attend, but Richard Hale requested her presence personally. When Emily walked into the venue, conversations halted. Cameras turned. Not because she demanded attention, but because everyone already knew. During the keynote speech, Charles Whitmore did something no one expected. He deviated from the script. He spoke about unseen pillars of success, about people who build without demanding recognition, about families who lead with values, not vanity. Then he thanked the Carter family by name. The applause was thunderous. Victoria sat frozen. Emily felt the weight of thousands of eyes, and for the first time discomfort crept in. Not from judgment, but from exposure. She never wanted the spotlight. But she would not run from the truth either. After the event, media outlets scrambled to uncover the Carter story. Interviews were requested and articles drafted and narratives rewritten. Emily declined them all. That refusal created even more fascination. Behind the scenes, tensions exploded. Whitmore board members questioned past decisions, alliances shifted, and Victoria's role within the family weakened rapidly. But the most painful moment came quietly. Victoria approached Emily alone. She did not apologize. She asked how it felt to win without trying. Emily looked at her gently and said this was never a competition. That answer cut deeper than anger ever could. Because now Victoria understood. Emily had never been beneath her. She had been beyond her. And the final reckoning was still coming. The Whitmore empire did not crumble overnight. It fractured slowly in places no one outside the family could see. Trust eroded. Confidence wavered. The name that once commanded effortless respect now carried a quiet asterisk. Behind closed doors, board meetings grew tense. Longtime partners questioned judgment, not numbers. How could a family so skilled at reading markets be so blind to character? The unspoken answer hung in the air, and everyone knew it involved Emily. Victoria felt the shift most brutally. Invitations slowed. Phone calls stopped. Returning. People who once chased her approval now spoke to her cautiously, as if unsure where she stood. Her influence had always been social, not strategic, and now that illusion was stripped away. At a private dinner, Charles addressed the family with a tone none of them recognized. He spoke about accountability, about the cost of arrogance, about the danger of mistaking polish for substance. He looked directly at Victoria. He said nothing else. That silence carried more weight than any lecture. Daniel made a decision that surprised everyone. He resigned from a senior role within Whitmore Global. He announced he would build something separate, something honest, something that reflected who he actually was. The media speculated. Some called it a power move, others a rebellion. Only Emily knew the truth. Daniel needed to stand on his own without borrowed prestige. Emily supported him quietly, connecting him with people who respected vision over lineage. She did not mentor him. She trusted him. That trust rebuilt something broken between them. Meanwhile, the Whitmore Foundation faced scrutiny. Donors asked harder questions. Transparency was demanded. The era of unquestioned authority was over. Victoria tried to regain control by aligning herself publicly with Emily's success. She spoke about family unity, shared values, and mutual respect. But the words felt hollow. Emily never contradicted her. She simply continued living the same way. That consistency became a mirror. The final blow came when a major partnership collapsed, not because of financial failure, but reputational risk. The official reason cited was misalignment of values. Charles Whitmore finally understood. Power without humility does not endure. One evening, he invited Emily to the mansion alone. Not as a negotiation, not as damage control. As a confession. He admitted he had built walls so high he forgot to look beyond them. He admitted he had judged worth by proximity to power rather than the quiet strength that sustained it. Emily listened. When he asked if forgiveness was possible, she paused. She said forgiveness was never hers to grant alone. Respect had to be shown forward, not begged backward. She told him to treat the next unseen person differently. That was all. Victoria watched from a distance, realizing something too late. Influence cannot be inherited when integrity is absent. And in losing the war for status, she lost something far more valuable. Her identity. The Whitmores began changing, but some changes cannot undo the past. Some lessons arrive only after loss. And the final chapter would not be about revenge. It would be about who remained standing when the noise faded. The world eventually moved on. Headlines faded, conversations shifted, and the Whitmore name settled into a quieter place, no longer feared, no longer worshipped, but understood. That was the cost of learning too late. Emily returned to her life the same way she had lived it before all of this began. Quiet mornings, intentional work, and evenings spent with people who knew her without needing introductions. She never spoke publicly about the Whitmores and never corrected the stories others told. Truth did not need her defense. Daniel built his company slowly. No shortcuts, no borrowed prestige. Clients came because of results, not connections. When people asked how he learned discipline, he smiled and said he learned it at home watching his sister succeed without noise. Their parents remained unchanged by the attention. Thomas Carter still believed a man was measured by his word. Helen still taught children with the same patience she always had. Fame never crossed their dinner table. Victoria stepped away from the public eye. Some said she was forced, others said she chose distance. In truth, she was rebuilding something fragile. A sense of self not anchored to status. Whether she succeeded, only time would tell. Charles Whitmore began funding projects that would never carry his name. Scholarships, anonymous grants, community programs hidden from the press. He finally understood what legacy really meant. One evening, Emily received a handwritten letter from him. No apology, no justification. Just gratitude. She folded it and placed it away. Months later, at a small industry conference, a young woman approached Emily nervously. She said she had watched how Emily carried herself through public scrutiny and wanted to know how to survive being underestimated. Emily smiled. She said, "Let them misunderstand you. Let them overlook you. Use the silence to build something so solid that when it finally appears, it speaks for itself." That advice spread quietly the way real power does. At a family gathering by the coast, Daniel raised a glass not to success, but to humility. He thanked his sister for never needing revenge to prove her worth. Emily looked out at the ocean, remembering all the moments she had been ignored, dismissed, and underestimated. None of it mattered now, because the people who treated her like nobody learned the truth too late. She had never needed their recognition. She had always been enough.